Stop waiting to become who you already are. You know what we've been taught, right? We've been taught that reinvention is the reward you get after you've arrived, after you've climbed the ladder, after you've proven yourself, after you've made it. We've been told that transformation is what happens when you finally have the luxury of time, the safety of success, the cushion of credibility. But what if that's a lie? What if reinvention isn't the destination, but the vehicle? What if the ability to pivot, to adapt, to evolve in real time isn't something you do after you've made it, but the very reason you make it at all? That's the truth I want to unpack with you today. And it's a truth that was brought into sharp, undeniable focus through a recent conversation with someone who embodies this principle in every fiber of their being. Someone whose work is not just changing lives, but reshaping the way we think about leadership, identity, and power. Someone who has turned the art of reinvention into a form of resistance, a strategy for survival, and a blueprint for freedom. Their impact isn't loud, it's deep. It's the kind of work that doesn't just inspire you to do more, it invites you to become more. And through their insights, I began to see something I had missed my entire life. Reinvention is not optional, it is essential. And for Black professionals, for entrepreneurs, for anyone building something meaningful in a world that wasn't designed with them in mind, reinvention is not just a skill, it's a superpower. Let me tell you about someone who understood this long before the rest of us caught up. In the early 2000s, there was a woman who had spent years working in the entertainment industry. She had access, she had visibility, she had a seat at tables that many people would have done anything to reach. But she also had a growing sense that the version of herself she was living wasn't the version she was meant to become. She was known, she was successful by most people's standards, and but she wasn't free. So she did something that looked up from the outside like career suicide. She walked away, she left the industry, she stepped out of the spotlight and into the unknown. And for a while, people didn't understand. They thought she had lost her mind, they thought she was throwing it all away. But what she was actually doing was shedding a skin that no longer fit. She spent the next several years in what can only be described as a season of becoming. She studied, she traveled, she sat with herself in ways that made her uncomfortable. She asked hard questions, she released old identities, she made space for something new to emerge. And when she came back, she didn't come back as the same person. She came back as someone who had learned to lead from the inside out, someone who understood that clarity isn't something you find, it's something you create, someone who knew that adaptability wasn't about being wishy washy or inconsistent. It was about being so rooted in who you are that you can bend without breaking. Today, she's a sought after strategist, a thought leader, and a guide for people who are navigating their own seasons of transformation. She didn't wait until she had permission to reinvent herself. She gave herself permission, and that made all the difference. Her story matters because it challenges the narrative we've been sold. The narrative that says you have to stay in your lane, that says pivoting is a sign of failure, that says if you change direction, you're flaky or unfocused or not serious. But here's what I've learned, both from her story and from watching countless others who have done the same thing. The people who win in the long run are not the ones who stay the same. They're the ones who are brave enough to evolve. Let's talk about what reinvention actually is, because I think we've confused it with something else. We've confused reinvention with starting over, with erasing your past, with pretending you weren't who you were. But that's not what reinvention is. Reinvention is integration. It's taking everything you've been, everything you've learned, everything you've survived, and using it as the foundation for who you're becoming. It's not about running from your story, it's about rewriting the ending. And here's the part that gets me every time. For Black professionals and entrepreneurs, reinvention is not just a personal journey, It's a professional necessity because the world we're building in is constantly shifting. The rules change, the goalposts move, the systems that were supposed to support us often don't. And if we're waiting for stability before we make our move, we'll be waiting forever. So we adapt, we pivot, we find new ways to create value, new ways to lead, new ways to show up, not because we're indecisive, but because we're strategic. And that's the first principle I want to leave with you today. Clarity creates momentum. When you know who you are, and I mean really know, not just the version of yourself that other people are comfortable with, but the version that feels true in your bones. When you know that, your next move becomes easier. You stop second guessing yourself. You stop waiting for permission. You stop asking if you're ready because you understand that readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. Clarity doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you're no longer afraid of the questions. Now, let me tell you about someone else. There's a man who spent over a decade building a career in corporate America. He was good at what he did, really good. He climbed the ranks, he earned the promotions, he checked all the boxes. But somewhere along the way, he realized that the ladder he was climbing was leaning against the wrong wall. He had spent so much time trying to fit into a system that wasn't built for him that he had lost sight of what he actually wanted to build. And the cost of that misalignment was starting to show up everywhere, in his health, in his relationships, in the quiet, nagging feeling that he was living someone else's dream. So he made a choice. He didn't quit his job overnight, he didn't burn any bridges, but he started to invest in a different vision. He started to carve out time for the work that made him come alive. He started to build something on the side, something that reflected his values, his voice, his vision. And over time, that side project became his main thing. Today, he runs a thriving business that serves thousands of people. He's financially free, he's creatively fulfilled, he's living on his own terms. But here's the kicker: none of that would have been possible if he hadn't been willing to pivot, if he hadn't been willing to let go of the identity that came with the corporate title and step into the uncertainty of building something new. And that brings me to the second principle: adaptability is a competitive advantage. In a world that rewards rigidity, the ability to pivot is what separates those who stay stuck from those who keep growing. Think about it. The companies that survive economic downturns are the ones that can shift their business models. The leaders who thrive in times of change are the ones who can read the room and adjust their approach. The individuals who build lasting success are the ones who understand that growth requires flexibility. But here's what we don't talk about enough: adaptability is not the same as people pleasing. It's not about changing who you are to fit in. It's about being so grounded in your core values that you can navigate any environment without losing yourself. It's about knowing what's non negotiable and being willing to negotiate everything else. Let me share one more story with you. There's a woman who spent years in a career that on paper looked perfect. She had the degree, she had the job, she had the respect of her peers. But she also had a secret. She was miserable. Every day felt like she was performing a role in someone else's play. She was exhausted from pretending, exhausted from smiling when she wanted to scream, exhausted from showing up as the version of herself that made everyone else comfortable, even though it was killing her on the inside. And then one day, she stopped, not dramatically and not with a big announcement. She just quietly started to make different choices. She started saying no to things that drained her. She started saying yes to things that scared her. She started telling the truth about what she wanted, even when it disappointed people. And you know what happened? Some people didn't understand. Some people judged her. Some people walked away. But the people who mattered stayed. And more importantly, she stayed. She stayed true to herself. She stayed committed to her own growth. She stayed in the process of becoming. Today, she's a coach, a speaker, and a guide for other women who are navigating their own journeys of transformation. She helps them see that their story isn't a liability, it's a resource, that their lived experience isn't something to hide, it's something to mine for wisdom. And that's the third principle. Your story has strategic value. The lessons in your lived experience can become a framework that helps others move forward in their own lives and businesses, but only if you're willing to own it. Only if you're willing to stop running from the parts of your story that feel messy or complicated or hard to explain. Only if you're willing to see that the very thing you thought disqualified you might actually be the thing that sets you apart. Because here's the truth: people don't connect with perfection, they connect with honesty, they connect with vulnerability, they connect with the courage it takes to say, I didn't have it all figured out, and I still don't, but I'm showing up anyway. That's the kind of leadership that changes lives. That's the kind of story that gives other people permission to write their own. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us with a choice. We can keep waiting, waiting for the right time, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for someone to give us permission to step into the fullness of who we are. Or we can recognize that reinvention is not something we do after we've made it, it's how we make it. We can recognize that clarity, adaptability, and the strategic use of our own stories are not luxuries. They are necessities. We can recognize that the version of ourselves we're becoming is not somewhere in the distant future. It's right here, right now, waiting for us to make space for it. But making space requires letting go. And letting go is hard. It's hard to release the roles that other people have assigned to us. It's hard to walk away from the identities that once felt safe. It's hard to step into the unknown, especially when the known, even if it's uncomfortable, feels predictable. But I want to ask you something. What is it costing you to stay the same? What opportunities are you missing because you're too afraid to pivot? What growth is being stunted because you're clinging to a version of yourself that you've outgrown? What impact are you not making because you're waiting for permission that's never going to come? And here's the question I really want you to sit with. What is one belief, role, or expectation you need to release so you can step into the next most powerful version of yourself? Because that's the work. That's the real work. Not the hustle, not the grind, not the performance. The work is the releasing, the shedding, the making space. The work is the willingness to say, I don't know who I'll be on the other side of this, but I trust that whoever I'm becoming is worth the risk. Here's what I know to be true: reinvention is not a one time event, it's a practice. It's something you come back to again and again. Every time you outgrow the container you're in, every time the vision expands, every time you realize that the life you're living is smaller than the life you're capable of. And for those of us who are building in spaces that weren't designed for us, reinvention is not optional. It's survival, it's strategy, it's how we create something sustainable in a world that's constantly trying to limit us. But it's also more than that. It's liberation. It's the refusal to be defined by other people's expectations. It's the audacity to believe that you are allowed to change your mind, to change your path, to change your entire life if that's what your growth requires. It's the deep soul level knowing that you are not who you were 5 years ago, and you're not who you'll be 5 years from now. And that's not a problem to fix, it's a truth to honor. So here's my invitation to you: stop waiting. Stop waiting to become who you already are. Stop waiting for permission to pivot, to evolve, to step into the fullness of your power. Stop waiting for the world to make space for you, and start making space for yourself. because the world doesn't need another version of you that's palatable, that's safe, that fits neatly into someone else's box. The world needs the version of you that's free, the version that's whole, the version that's unapologetically, authentically, powerfully you. And that version is not waiting for you to arrive. That version is waiting for you to decide. So decide. Decide that you're done playing small. Decide that you're done waiting for the right time. Decide that you're done living a life that looks good on paper but feels empty in your soul. Decide that reinvention is not something you do after you've made it, it's how you make it. And then watch what happens when you give yourself permission to become.